music, all of these Pythagorean insights into order, I think, come out of this herding, domesticated animal husbandry, we call it husbandry, because it's a model of caring for nature. And these ideas are the inspiration and the purpose, to my mind. I mean, the social purpose, because I can, get rid of my stuff and feel better about how I was abused in childhood and this and that and the other thing with psychedelics. But that's all personal growth stuff. But an idea, can be shared. You can take it and you can lay it at somebody's feet. And where do they come from? When you ask the question, where do the ideas come from? This is Platonic Philosophy 101, ladies and gentlemen. This is why the Greeks gave up fishing, to discuss this problem. Where do the ideas come from? And we are no closer to understanding that. And yet the ideas are the signposts of our destiny. They guide us forward, and yet we know not from whence nor whither. Well, I think now, so Plato's take on that was, he said, well, there must be a perfect world somewhere where all these things exist and the numbers and everything, there's a perfect form for everything in a higher dimensional world called the archetypes. Well, 2,000 years of philosophical sophistication have shown certain problems with that point of view, but fewer than you might think. I mean, the mystery of form, the problem of form, what is it? Where does it come from? What sustains it? We are nothing more than form. If it weren't for form, we would be no different than the dirt under our feet. And form intrudes into matter, and then it withdraws. And when it withdraws, they put you in a hole and put dirt on top of you. So it's very important to understand, what is this coming and going of form? If we take this pillow and saw it in two, it's a pretty undramatic event. If we take one of us and saw us in two, it's an extremely dramatic event. And what is the difference there? It's that this object is three-dimensional, and this object is four-dimensional. This object has a quality about it called being alive. Being alive, also technically known as metabolism, means that material is moving along temporal gradients within the confines of this organism. Material is not moving along any gradients within this thing. It's just where it is. There it sits. But in here, a form is being maintained from within. And if I were to die, the form would collapse. Here, no form is being maintained except the form imposed. This is an imposed form. It has no sense of itself, and it doesn't sustain itself from any kind of internal integrity. But higher dimensional objects, like animals and plants and human beings, have this quality. Well, so then what we've been talking about here, albeit sloppily, is the fact that we seem to occupy a higher dimension in the natural order than other things. And this higher dimension has to do with the fact that we have a little piece of mind, a little chunk of this higher order organization. Well then, going toward that, as visionaries, as users of psychedelics, society keeps adjusting its trim tabs, as it were, to mirror this transcendental goal. And this is what we want to become. We want to become like the sensed object in our imagination. And shamanism is a pipeline about this. It's almost as though the end state, well, here's a model for it. It's almost as though the ordinary causal flow of information from the past to the future must make a place for like a 3 to 5% backward flow. And this is what we call intuition. It's that vague, unformed knowing that comes without any baggage of causal mechanism, but it's true knowledge. You know how it's going to be. Well, it may be that that time is somehow information permeable, that future potential states of existence are actually somehow in resonance with states of existence in the present and in the past. Our models of how the world works are very, very simple. I mean, basically we operate with mechanical push-pull models that are appropriate to very simple mechanical systems, and yet we know that we are far more complex even than the most complex physical systems. This last 15,000 years has been something, and the last 500 years has really been something. It's so close now, the transcendental object, that it informs everything. The metaphor, the model to hold in your mind as you gaze at the earth in its travail is the metaphor of birth, not death. That a gestation process of 20,000 years is coming to an end. Culture using, language using, minded creatures are coming to some kind of fermentative climax. And we cannot extrapolate the human career on this planet centuries into the future. It ain't going to be like that. It's an absurd question to ask the question, what will the world be like in 500 years? What the world will be like in 500 years is unimaginable, because in the next 40 years, we are going to pass through this quantized transition where we actually become insiders and players in the game. History is a state of becoming. It's a state of moving from the inarticulate, unreflecting, animal style of organization to the self-reflecting, minded, conscious, energy-controlling style. But to get from one to the other takes about 20,000 years, and it's a bitch. You don't know where you are. You don't know up from down. You cannot tell what is happening. There's just migrations and warfare and pogroms and gene mixing and hysteria of every sort and Messiah this and religion that, and they're slaughtering these people and these people are doing that. And it's like a bad dream. It's like a psychedelic trip is what it's like. It's a 15 to 25,000 year dash to authentic being from the animal body. And it would have been a lot easier to understand if 10,000 years ago we hadn't cut the telephone wire to nature. Because from then on we haven't been able to figure out what's going on. And it's been left to men with large egos to figure out what was going on. And what they figured out was going on was that there was a lot of free women, land, animals, and money that needed to be organized for their pleasure, because they lost the connection to this planetary birth process. Now, and like a birth process, I mean, the metaphor is worth pursuing, because a birth is violent, blood is shed, there's moaning and groaning and thrashing around, and yet this is not an automobile accident. This is not a human tragedy. This is how life works. This is centrally scripted in to how human beings operate. If this didn't happen, we wouldn't be here. Well, and yet, if you've ever been pregnant or been around a pregnant person, this is a wonderful state of equilibrium, of self-satisfaction, of completion, and yet the very fact that it exists ensures that it's going to be rent, it's going to be torn, it's going to end violently in separation of these two beings. But then there are all kinds of births. There's stillbirth, the most disturbing and unsettling of all. There's, breech. There's cesarean. There's bad presentation. There's easy labors, hard labors. And I think this is the choice that we still have some choices left. And a choice still to be made is it going to be a hard labor or an easy labor? It's how fast we educate ourselves. That's the lubrication in the birth canal of this pup. How fast we educate ourselves. Are we going to fight it, or are we going to go with it? And it's really frightening. I mean, because what we want is, first of all, forgiveness for what we've done, which ain't likely to come. And then we want to go back and paint ourselves blue and be tribal and turn our back on all of this. But I don't think it's going to be like that. It's propelling us to some kind of higher order. The faith is that history must have been for something, and that everything is to be knitted together, and everything is to be reborn anew. And I don't think this is not a religious doctrine exactly. It's more like the biological faith. I mean, we see it everywhere. We see it in the birth that I was just describing. We see it in the metamorphosis of insects. Heraclitus said, "Puntit rea," all flows. And I think that this is the hardest thing to learn. It certainly has been the hardest thing for me to learn in my life. And I assume then, by extrapolation, maybe this is one of the hard things to come to terms with. Everything flows. Nothing lasts. I mean, not the travail, not the horror, not the women you love, not the women who drive you crazy, not the children you love, not the children that drive you crazy. Everything is in the process of changing into something else, even at the very moment that you recognize its coherence as an entity. And this is the bad news that the ego doesn't want to hear. This is what the ego is created to deny, because the ego is, it's the effort of flesh to make diamond, and it can't be done. You cannot make an indestructible, adamantine, clear substance. It can't be done. But it's all tied up with our fear of death. We assume that if we release ourselves into this flow, we will be swept away, that our identity will cease to exist, that we will somehow not be there. This is an artifact of language. It's a horrible misunderstanding about who we are and how the whole system is working.